On Sunday morning, before sunrise, Mary Magdalene set off for the tomb. She found the heavy stone that had sealed the entrance rolled away. At this, she took off like a rabbit and ran back to where the team was staying. She found Peter and that other team member who was a good mate of Jesus and puffed out, "He's gone, someone's taken him and I don't know where." Peter and the other bloke took off at top speed for the tomb. The other bloke got there first and looked inside. Sure enough, apart from the burial sheet, the tomb was empty. Then Peter caught up, went inside and saw the empty tomb and the burial sheet, with the cloth that had been wound around the head of the corpse lying separately. The other bloke came in after Peter, saw all of this, and he was the first one to believe what had happened, even though at the time they didn't understand that the Bible said that Jesus would come back from the dead.
Australian stories celebrate the Aussie battler, individuals who struggle against the odds and win. The Aussie Bible tells the story of a man who defeated humanity's ultimate enemy, death. Jesus' victory was so unexpected, it even caught his friends by surprise.
G'day. Mary was standing in the garden outside the tomb, crying her eyes out. Still crying, she stooped down and looked inside. She saw two angels in white, one sitting where the head would have been, one where the feet would have been. "Now then," they said, "why all these tears?" "They've taken him," she sobbed. "The master's been taken and I don't know where." As she said this, she turned back to the garden and she saw Jesus standing there without knowing that it was him. "Now then," he said, "why all these tears? Who are you looking for?" Taking him for the gardener, she sobbed, "Oh, please, if you took him, just tell me where he is and I'll come and fetch him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned to face him and cried out, "Teacher!" He said, Now, don't cling to me like this. I've got to go. I've got to go to the Father. But you whiz back to the team and tell them I'm going to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary rushed back and told the others that she'd seen the Master, and she told them what he'd said. That same day, a Sunday at sunset, when the team was hiding in the house with all the doors shut because they were still afraid of the temple authorities, Jesus came. He stood in the middle of the room and greeted them with the word peace, and then showed them his wounds in his hands and in his side. They were beside themselves with excitement and happiness to see the Master. Again Jesus said, "Peace be with you," adding, "Just as the Father sent me, I am sending you." Taking a deep breath, he said, "Receive my Spirit. If you forgive someone's wrongdoings, they're forgiven. If you don't, they aren't." Although Thomas, who was a twin, was one of the team, he wasn't with them that night. So when the others said, "Hey, we've seen the Lord," Tom said, "Pull the other leg. Unless I see the nail wounds in his hands and touch them, and the wound in his side, I just won't believe it." 8 days later, they were together again, and Tom was with them this time. And Jesus came, even though the doors were shut, and stood in the middle of the room and greeted them. And Jesus said to Thomas, "Come on, reach out your hand, touch these wounds in my hands and in my side, give up your niggling doubts, and trust me." Thomas was gobsmacked and said, "You are my Lord and my God." Jesus said, "You trust me because you've seen me, but really well off are those who haven't seen me, but trust me just the same." All of this has been written down so that you can trust Jesus personally as the promised one, the Christ, God's own Son. And so by trusting him personally, you can have real life with God, starting here and now and going on forever. A bit later, Jesus' mates saw him on the shore of Lake Tiberias. It was like this. There was a bunch of them there. Peter, Tom, Nathan, the 2 Zebedee boys and a couple of others. Peter said, "I'm going to do a spot of fishing." "Good idea," said the others. "We'll come too." So they got out the boat, fished all night, didn't catch a tiddler. About sunrise the next morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but they didn't recognize him. He called out, "Caught anything?" "Nope," they shouted, "not a thing." "Drop your net over the right side of the boat, try again." They did what he said, and this time the net was so full they couldn't pull the thing back into the boat. John said to Peter, "Hey, it's the Lord." When Peter heard it was the Lord, he grabbed the coat he'd taken off when he was working, and he jumped in the water and headed for the shore. The others stayed in the boat about 100 metres out, and dragging the full net behind them, they rowed back in. When they landed, they found a campfire going and fish and bread already cooking. Jesus said, "Fetch some of the fish you've just caught." It was Peter who dragged the net up onto the beach. They counted the fish, 153 whoppers, and the net didn't break. "Come on," said Jesus, "breakfast's on." None of them was game enough to say, "Who are you?" knowing it was him. Jesus shared out the fresh bread and the barbecued fish. This was the third time they'd seen him since he'd come back from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus turned to Peter and asked, "Peter Johnson, do you love me more than all these others do?" Peter said, "You bet, too right." "Then feed my lambs." A second time, Jesus said, "Peter Johnson, do you love me more than all these others do?" Peter said, "Yes, Master, you know I do." "Then look after my sheep." A third time, Jesus said, "Peter Johnson, do you love me more than all these others do?" Peter was really cut, because he'd been asked this question 3 times. He replied, "Master, you know everything, so you know I love you." "Then feed my sheep," Jesus said. Then he added, "When you were young, you dressed yourself and went wherever you wanted. When you're old, you'll hold out your arms and others will dress you and they'll take you where you don't want to go." Jesus said this to let Peter know what kind of death he would die, and that his death would point people to God. Finally, Jesus said to Peter, "Follow me." Peter turned around and saw John, the team member who'd always been a real mate to Jesus, walking behind them. It was John who'd sat next to Jesus at their last meal before his death and who said, "Lord, who is the traitor?" Peter saw John and said, "What about this bloke, Lord? What will happen to him?" Jesus said, "That's not your concern. If I want him to live until I come back, what concern of that is yours? Your job is to follow me." Now, that's why some people at the time went around saying that John wouldn't die. But Jesus didn't say John wouldn't die. He just said, "If I want him to live." John is the eyewitness to these things, and he's known to be a truthful bloke. There are heaps of other things that Jesus did, and if all of them were written down, the whole planet would be drowning in books about Jesus.